This is a great interview with Jenny Wiemert in Orlando. She's been top dog there for years, got out of production and considers herself the team mom, team therapist. But she's just a rock star. We get right into it immediately on clear cooperation and her thoughts on why it's important for NAR to rule that all listings should be on the MLS versus a lot of the luxury brands who suggest otherwise. We also talk about short-term rentals a little bit because Orlando is a hot market for that and what that means for hotels. And we also talk about when to know is the right time to get out of doing the thing and becoming more of a manager and leader. It's a great interview. Excited for you to hear. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey. We have had an incredible run of great guests, great shows, and great webinars, too. If you're a vendor listening to this podcast and you have not signed up for our vendors only webinar where we teach you all of our ways how to become a super vendor in real estate, connecting with the top realtors like Jenny, then email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. We're a top 5% global real estate podcast, and it's because of guests like Jenny Wiemert, top #1 Orlando real estate team. She personally hasn't sold for 10 years. She calls herself the team mom and team therapist, but she's a little bit more impressive than that. We're going to get into it. But the volume keeps going up. They've owned the brokerage for 8 years. Jenny is top dog in Orlando. Welcome to the show, Jenny.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we've got a lot of things that I want to talk to you about when it comes to building team culture. But one thing we were talking about earlier in the pre-show was this concept of clear cooperation and the NAR ruling and all the negativity and things that are making it harder for the life of the realtor. Tell me what's going on with clear cooperation and what needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I know the answer what to happen, but I can tell you what's going on. Big debates out there on whether or not all properties should be added to the MLS. And there's a camp that believes that all properties should be added to the MLS because it's what's best for the consumer, having access to all of the inventory. There's another camp out there that believes that, sellers should have choice to whether or not to put it on the market and choose their exposure. And there are certain companies, mostly luxury, that want to hold the properties off the market and try to, get all of the activity to come to them so that they can double side the deals. And then is that the right thing for the consumer or not? So two camps there. NAR just made a ruling and said they're holding to the clear cooperation rule, which requires us to put it in the MLS within 24 hours. But they gave us a second choice of it still has to go in the MLS, but they can opt out of IDX, which means, syndicating to websites, Zillow, Realtor.com, and so forth.
Yeah. Well, one thing I like to do on this show is, I say it all the time. If you're listening to this podcast, we've had hundreds of shows. You've sat in hundreds of meetings and maybe thousands, and you talk about this stuff a lot. And so there's certain buzzwords like clear cooperation, like the NAR ruling, things that are talked about a lot. And if you're tired of hearing about it, or if you think you know everything about it, it'd be really easy to tune out. What I like about this show is I like to dumb it down and think about things a little bit differently and wonder why and how we got there. So let me ask it like this. The two schools of camp, as you've explained it, is that some realtors, specifically luxury brands, believe that it's unnecessary to put it all in the MLS. If I have a listing, it can be a pocket listing. I can talk to my friends. I don't need to tell the world that this house is for sale. The other school of thought is the more traditional route for the last 100 years that there has been realtors and is the MLS, how old is the MLS? Do you know?
I don't know. It's I think we've at least had the broker co-op since the 90s, like where we had buyer agency.
So they created that for a reason, and we'll get into that. But if I have a watch and I want to sell my watch, even if it's a really nice watch, $20,000 watch. There's nothing that says I need to put it on a database where everyone goes to see the watches for sale. Tell me what's different about selling homes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of iterations over the years, and we've landed here, with MLS being the, biggest tool that realtors have access to, creating that big marketplace for buyers to be able to see properties. It's easier for the buyers to be able to browse, and it's also easier for agents to be able to, maneuver in the market on behalf of the clients. If we go back to, the European way or the old way where, it's almost like being a tenant in the market. You have to go to each individual brokerage website to go see what they have available. And, some post it, some don't. It's just, is that the best thing for the consumer? Is that the best thing for the marketplace? Is that the best thing for the seller? It's hard to believe that it is. Wouldn't, if you were a seller, want maximum exposure for your property to have the most eyeballs and the most, qualified buyers walking through your door to be able to purchase your home? I mean, it's just sort of common sense. So I can't find an argument that I could use outside of maybe, safety or concern for, if it's a celebrity or something, why you wouldn't want maximum exposure if you're putting your house on the market. I can't, outside of benefiting myself personally, saying I could double side this, I get all the leads, I'm going to cut out Zillow and Realtor.com because I hate the way this has gone down in the market. It's really not the best thing for the consumer. And then if that goes down, like where they, let's say Compass starts holding off all of their listings off of the market, then what happens? What if EXP does that? What if KW does that? Are we just going to all have to consolidate to one big brokerage to be able to have, access to listings?
But what you're talking about, Jenny, and I haven't even heard the other side's argument. I haven't talked to anyone on the other side. I'm just listening and reacting. Let's say that what you're saying is true. Let's agree that what you're saying is true. It's best interest for the consumer, the buyer, or someone who's selling to have access to everything, to have access to the MLS and see everything. Let's agree that that is true. I still don't know what allows the governing body to say that you have to do it, right? Again, going back to the watch analogy, would that be the best thing? If I was trying to buy a watch, I'd love a database that has every watch and every price. And if I'm selling my watch, I want the biggest pool of buyers. Yes, but there's nothing that governs that says I have to do that. Why is it different in housing?
So it's the governing body is governing real estate agents, and that's National Association of Realtors. So if we are members of the National Association of Realtors and our MLS is a member of the National Association of Realtors, we have rules that we have to follow. So if you are hiring an agent who is a National Association of Realtors member, we have to abide by these rules. Now, you can hire somebody that's not a member of National Association of Realtors. It is not a requirement to join. They're few and far between, but they do not have to follow those rules. FSBOs don't have to follow those rules. So they still have options. They can go on their own. They can go to unsighted. But if you want an experienced agent that is following ethics and rules in the marketplace, we have to abide by clear cooperation.
So you mentioned Compass. We'll just use them as an example here. It seems like they're leading the charge on wanting to go away with clear cooperation. What would be, outside of the argument of this is better for me, which I know is you're on the other side, so that's how you're viewing it. Would they say anything differently, like this actually is better for the seller, this actually is better for the buyer, or is their argument just, hey, you shouldn't have to tell me what to do?
No, they believe that it's, I don't know actually their core arguments, to be honest, but I'm assuming they believe it's better for their sellers. They want their sellers to have choice. They don't believe we should have to force them to put it into MLS if we do any sort of public marketing. As a matter of fact, they're just blatantly going against the rule right now. It's maddening. But So, and they always have. They've always kept pocket listings. That's the luxury market. It is what it is. They all want to sell at the country clubs and not put it on Zillow. Zillow.
Oh, so this is specifically a luxury listing issue.
Mostly.
Yeah.
That's who tends to be on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Our luxury agents, because they've been doing this for years.
Interesting. But I imagine with numbers, I think I forgot to say your numbers at the beginning, 400 million on 750 transactions. When you do 400 million with 58 full-time agents, you're going to have luxury as well. What do your luxury agents feel about this?
Well, it just depends on, the consumers. So the only argument I could come up with that would lead me to say, okay, we should keep this as a pocket listing would be either, safety for this if it's a celebrity client, or maybe, they can't do showings. They don't want all of the exposure, which, sounds crazy. Why would you not want all the exposure if you're going to sell your property? But maybe
is it because of some like either high end profile people, celebrities that don't want they just want the sale. They don't want the exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. If they have super expensive stuff in their property, or maybe like we had a celebrity that was online that was a villain, and they're like, we don't want, people to know where I live, kind of thing. And they're going to be able to tell by, if you show my pool, they're going to know that's me because it's a very specific pool and they film at their property, so something like that maybe. But to the average consumer, most sellers want the most money and to sell in the least amount of time. And that's their goal, right? And to be able to do that, maximum exposure matters. So do I love Zillow and Realtor.com have taken our leads and are selling it back to us? No. But we're down that road. So how are you going to, why would a seller ever choose not to syndicate to Zillow and Realtor.com? I think that rule is just silly. But
Well, it's an interesting debate. I wanted to start off hot, and we're going to dial it back a little bit. We're not going to debate the whole time, but thanks for sharing. I'd be curious to see where we're at 6 months from now.
Yeah, me too.
You mentioned affordability being a tough issue in Orlando, but really nationwide. How do you even address affordability?
Well, so right now we have kind of a chasm in the market, right? So we have the buyers that are up against a ceiling for affordability, and recently, NAR lost a lawsuit and moved the buyer agent commission over to the buyer. So that didn't help affordability. So we have affordability, that's a problem. On the other side, we have sellers that are still tied to their numbers, and we were still having inventory issues because there was no solution to creating more inventory in the seller's market. So the sellers still think that they have some control, and they're not ready to concede on pricing yet. But we're starting to stack inventory. It's turning into a buyer's market, and we have this affordability issue. So we have this chasm in between, and somebody's going to have to blink. Either sellers are going to have to concede on pricing, and you don't want to be the last one to do that. You want to be the first one behind that snowball, or we have to fix affordability. And so, some ways that we're doing it internally.
Can I pause you for a second, Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, if no one can afford the houses, they're just priced wrong. Am I wrong?
Right. And so sellers have to concede. Somebody is going to sell. They need to come down on pricing to, match affordability.
And I mean, if you have 100 houses, I'm sure 1, 2, maybe even 3 have done this, but the vast majority, the other 97, are still holding strong. How long does that happen before you actually see it start to teeter?
Hard to say. I mean, it was like a cliff the last time in 2006 and 7, but we're not expecting this like precipitous drop, but we are expecting, kind of we're going to have a soft landing, but we have to come back down. Like, we had artificial inflation during COVID. And so if you were to put us on a trajectory where we should be without that artificial, boost during COVID, we need to come back a bit and match affordability. We're not that far off. We still have an inventory problem inherently. So I don't think we're going to drop off the cliff like we did in 2006, unless we go to war or something crazy happens, but.
When it dropped off in 2006, was that in anticipation for '08 because of, it started kicking in, or was that completely unrelated?
No, 2006 and 7 was the big fall. '08 was when we were just stuck in the mud and sellers couldn't sell, buyers couldn't buy, and they were afraid to buy because they were afraid to buy, too high because they saw the market coming down. But 2006 and 7 were the big declines, because 2006 was artificially inflated as well. So like August of 2006, the market turned off. And after that, it just went like gangbusters down. 2008, we were all just stuck. And 9, it actually started to turn around.
It's interesting. I mean, the diehards investors will say when the answer to the question, when is the best time to buy, is always yesterday. I don't know if it's that simple anymore. And in this market, I think what most people, even who typically subscribe to that, are wondering is there's 3 different factors that go into it: the stock market, the whatever's going on governmentally, which are related, and then what's actually happening in the housing market. If we address those things right now, do you still have people that are just like, hey, listen, buy the house, get it, and figure it out later? There's always options you can do, but buy the house. Is that what we're telling people?
Absolutely. Yeah. Buying a home is still a wealth building machine. You're still hedging against inflation. You're locking in your tax rates here in Florida. You're locking in your interest rates. You're locking in your payment. You know what your payment's going to be for the next 30 years. If you're renting, you're going to be paying inflations, right? So yes, buying a house is absolutely the thing to do, especially if it's for your primary home. Why throw away all your money? Investors right now, the institutional investors are buying up like everything like crazy. They're actually developing properties. They're developing communities in Florida to just rent. So, when you own a home, you own, like a physical investment versus the stock market that is just paper. And where else can you get that investment for a fraction of the cost of the investment? So you put in 20%, you get 100% of the sales price as the investment. So it's always good to buy real estate, and if you're a speculator or a mom and pop investor, worst case scenario, you move into it.
Well, so it's interesting you say that, because I, like all Midwesterners, was looking at Florida for potential rental properties. And the fear that I had, this would have been 3 years ago, that ultimately made me buy elsewhere back in the Midwest, is because it was so popular and so annoying to the locals that they're just starting to pass all these laws and bylaws that keep short-term rentals from being able to thrive, and even long-term rentals in some cases. You're living in Florida, you're in Orlando, which is historically a great investment property area. Does that concern you as a local, like having, everyone coming in there buying up the properties for investments?
Well, it's zoned. So most of that short-term rental property stuff is happening down by the parks in Kissimmee and what's the name of the city? It's not going to come to me right now. Davenport. So down there, that is all short-term rental. It is extremely saturated, especially since COVID. It was everybody wanted to get into Airbnbs, and so I would personally steer clear unless you are going to personally manage that Airbnb and possibly even clean it yourself, because there's no profit.
There's no margin?
No, none right now.
So you would be essentially buying for equity.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to, in order to compete in that market, you have to come in and theme out every room to be like Disney. You have to put a ton of money into your furnishings. You have to, put a ton of money into marketing.
You know what? It's raising the stakes, though. As someone who's you and I are thinking from the investor standpoint, but from a consumer standpoint, it is really raising the game. Like if you think about staying at an Airbnb and the experience you're going to have, like if that's the expectation I should have, that's pretty good for the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem is though, it's so saturated that they can't get their rates up because there's so much to choose from. And so their occupancy rates are down, their daily rates are down. And so after you pay all the fees to the third parties, the Airbnbs, Verbos, whatever, after you're paying your maintenance fees and cleaning fees and everything else, it just HOA fees are so high in those communities because they're all resort communities. It doesn't leave much on the bone. You can make it work if you self-manage.
It is an interesting disruptor in the industry. If you look at like the hotel industry, it was pretty cutthroat. All the hotels were marketing against each other, cutting prices, much like gas stations. And then Airbnb comes along and flips the industry on its head. And then what you saw is like the hotels starting to band together to protect itself from this outside entity. And I think it's working. Like Airbnb took a big old hit last year because of a lot of moves. Like I personally am a user on both sides, but on the owner side, a lot of the moves they made protected the people staying in the homes and not the people who own the homes, which makes no sense to me because you have no business without owners and you're making a ton of moves that are basically crippling them as the owners. And then what I think, I don't have any stats to prove this. I'm going to do some digging since we're talking about this. I'd be curious to see what's happening with hotels. I bet they're doing better now because of
their occupancy's up.
Yeah. So you actually know that you have those stats. Is that important for you to know in your industry?
Well, sure. If you're selling the short-term rental side of things, yeah. Yeah. And it's, we are a destination state. So, yeah. I mean, it's important, but I think, it's really interesting to watch it all play out on the short-term rental side of things. I don't know how, if we go into this true buyer's market, we have a lot of foreigners sitting on properties that, are being affected with their, what the dollar's worth and such. And so they're selling. We have a lot of buyers that speculated, thought they were going to get rich being Airbnb owners with their properties on the market that are way upside down on these properties. So that's going to be a completely different bubble than what we're seeing out in the residential side of things in Orlando.
Fascinating. Let's get back to you, Jenny. You haven't sold for 10 years. And I asked you in the pre-show if you miss it. You said yes. It's interesting to me to see the people that decide to go from doing the thing to managing, because it's not for everybody. It's not the skill set that everyone possesses. A lot of times, if you're really good at sales, you're actually not great at managing people and growing the team. You have found it to be different. Your husband is the broker, and you run the front office for agents and culture and all the things. I thought it was really funny. You called yourself the team mom and the team therapist.
What? And firefighter.
Yeah, and firefighters. So tell me what goes into the thought process of I'm really good at selling real estate, but now I just want to manage people. And you've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah. Something I necessarily set out to do. I had my babies and I started this business just wanting to farm my community. But I was wanting to build my community to be the way I wanted to live in my community. And so if I wanted to do an egg hunt for my kids, I just scaled that to the community, right? So I started out as a farmer. I would just put my kids in the stroller. I had twins. They're 24 now. But I put the kids in the stroller. I'd just go meet the neighbors. And I would have bunco groups for the ladies. And I would do garage sales. And we would do Easter egg hunts and so on. And then that just took off way faster than I anticipated it to. I thought, well, let me get, the kids to kindergarten and then I'll really kind of grow the business and I'll just work in this neighborhood for now. Well, I ended up with 80% market share in that 400 home community. And I realized I had a kind of a formula. So then I picked up and dropped into another community of 400 homes. And that 800 home, those two farms, keep in mind, this is back in 2003. So we were like still doing paper newsletters and stuff. The 800 homes got us to about 40 million in production. But along the way, I was getting to ceilings, right? Like there's only so much time in a day. And so I would get to a ceiling of, do I need to break through the ceiling and hire leverage and help or do I fall back and just get really on purpose about who I'm working with or price points or type of leads, buyer or seller. And I just kept choosing to go through the ceiling because I felt like I was leaving talent on the table. And I really do enjoy working. I love what I do. I like with a passion. So I kept just choosing to go through the ceiling, and I just kept trying to put my finger in holes. So it's like, if I was getting bogged down in the admin side of things, which most agents get, good agents, they tend to be like ADD, whatever, spear fingers. They're not going to be good at the paperwork. So I would hire somebody to do the paperwork. And then I was like, okay, I can't be in the car driving around all day. I have too much to do to manage all these relationships. So I hired a buyer's agent, and then I focused on listings. And then that took us, kind of rinse and repeat there. In that scenario, I started realizing, okay, well, 2000, I would say 7, 8, the digital world came online. And so the realtors and the realtor.coms and the Zillows started selling leads, and they started getting a lot of traction. And I had to play defense for my communities because consumers aren't just looking at the newsletter, they're Googling too. And so I played defense, which turned into offense because I ended up with too many leads. So then what do? So I could either just give them away, I could try to get referrals, or I could just continue to use that as a springboard to be able to add agents and feed their families. So really, the thing that is different between our teams and most teams is that we retain our agents. And so most of my agents are still with us. And I've got agents that have been with me 18 years. But
what's interesting is the trajectory was out of necessity. And I feel like I've had people on the show even that start a team because they think they're supposed to start a team. That's how we get bigger. That's how we have more resources. That's how we sell more real estate as we duplicate. But they're still selling, 20 houses a year and can handle more. You literally physically did you say you moved neighborhoods because you basically had saturated that? Was that the driving force, is to duplicate real estate sales by moving neighborhoods?
Didn't move there. No, I just duplicated the efforts.
Oh, you duplicated. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would have been really fascinating. That'd be an interesting move, moving to the new place to sell the homes. I like that. You mentioned, so you became a family, you had twins in that time. This is 24 years ago because your twins are 24, right? And they're now in the time of life where they're deciding, do they want to come into the family business or do their own thing? It sounds like both of them are thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. My daughter, well, she doesn't want to admit it, but she's a marketing director for a trucking company right now. But she's learning all kinds of great skill sets that she can bring home someday, hopefully. But it's okay if she doesn't. We just want her to thrive. And our son is coming into the real estate world and working on passing his test now, and coming in and will be working his way up in the real estate side of things.
That's got to be pretty exciting for you guys. Did you ever coach them in sports or anything like that?
Yep, that was the catalyst for me to not be a listing agent 10 years ago. Somebody came to me and said, I've been praying and God just keeps leading me back to you to be the volunteer cheer coach for the 6th graders. And I was like, well, how do you say no to that? Right? So
that's a good technique. I've been praying and I want you to do something for free.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, oh, God, well, if God says so. So that year I was on track to do 100 listings, just, as the listing agent. And it was like, I don't have that time. So my volunteer position turned into me handing over my listing job to an agent and just like, don't screw this up. And so it probably cost me $300,000 that year to be the volunteer cheer coach, but I wouldn't take it back. And quite honestly, that catalyst, I needed it. It was time for me to step out. I was getting burned out. And so I should have handed that job off at probably even sooner. And in hindsight, I should have handed it off to more than one agent because I have high capacity, they're the superstar agents do, but the reality is not everybody is going to want to do or can do 100 transactions on their back a year. That's just a lot. So Lessons learned along the way.
What I like about you, Jenny, is you have a very unique ability to remain calm and chill amidst high intensity conversations and topics. I said it before, team mom, team therapist, team firefighter. I can see that. I can see that in, we're talking about things. You have a very even keel response about you. When Aaron Ludin first brought Real Producers to Orlando and started a masterclass, you were on that first panel. Do you remember what you talked about? What was it? Was it a top producer panel?
I don't remember. We had brokers on the first panel. So it was, it was a few top brokers, and it was exciting because I didn't know them personally, and I was excited to hear what they were doing and get to know them. The one thing I will say in Orlando, and it's probably thanks to Aaron and Orlando Real Producers, is that, the top brokers and the top agents, we play nice together at the top. Like we collaborate, we help each other. We rarely step on each other's toes. We're not cutthroat. I mean, we don't need to be. There's enough out there for all of us. And so I can call some of my top competitors and they will and it goes both ways, but we'll help each other through issues. We'll actually even give each other opportunities because sometimes you just can't do it all.
Well, we're a big fan of hope at Real Producers, and that was the hope. The other thing we're a fan of is education. Tell me what you're reading. What are your resources? What are the podcasts you're listening to? Give me all of it.
Yeah. I love podcasts. My favorite one right now is it's called Team EOS. Ethan Butte runs it. He works with Follow Up Boss, and he's interviewing top teams on their systems and how they're operating, and it's fascinating. I love that. The book comes from Traction, right? EOS system comes from Traction, or the book Traction, I believe. Yeah. All that languaging. Yeah, the implementer and integrator and all that, rocket fuel and blah, blah, blah. So the book that we're working through right now is not really, a book per se, but we're working through what to say. And so
it's top of the charts right now.
Yeah, and they have playing cards that we play with at the team and stuff. So we're kind of working on mastering that right now. And what was the other thing? Podcasts, book.
Yeah, any other resources that you use to stay on top of it? You're very knowledgeable. I mean, the fact that you instantly knew the hotels were up, like stats like that, like how do you keep in the know?
I am a learner, so I spend a lot of time reading, online and, local, like Orlando Business Journal type of things. I stay pretty connected to groups. I stay in the rooms with top agents across the nation, thanks to some top relationships with like Realtor.com and Zillow and such. But, I'm just a learner at heart. I can't get enough information. I'm not comfortable if I don't know it. Especially in a leadership position. That's my job.
I had a lot of fun getting to know you, Jenny. I appreciate you sharing all your trade secrets and having a lot of fun with me.
You bet. Anytime.
If you want to influence who is on the show or what we talk about, please email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. And if you want to find out what the stats are on hotels, email Jenny and we'll put all of her info and socials in the bio. We'll see you next time.